Hello, welcome everyone to Tampa Live Podcast. This week we have a very special guest with us today. We have the Senior Regional Sales Manager for the Southeast region of Nationwide Appraisal Network, Jason McMullen. He's here to break down all of our appraisal questions. I know many of us have tons of questions, and today we're going to unload and let him help us guide us into finding the answers that we really need in this real estate industry, especially in the Tampa market, right? So how's it going, guys? Tyler Wynn?
I'm doing good, man. It's Happy Friday to everybody. So.
Happy Friday. It's holiday season. We are closing this 2024 out. 2 weeks away from Christmas. Hope you guys are getting the shopping. Nobody looks like they've gotten the shopping started yet. But
I'm done. No shopping.
Jeff and John, how's it going?
Doing well.
Doing
Glad
well?
to be here. Glad to be here again.
All right, great. So, yeah, man, we got our guest, Jason, with us today. Man, thank you for spending time with us. I know you got a busy week, always traveling. Yep. You're the Southeast region, so you cover multiple states when it comes to appraisals.
I've got the 9 states of the Southeast, from Arkansas, the Carolinas, down to Florida. So,
wow.
I'm based here in the Tampa market, but on the road a lot. So, yeah.
And so what does that look like? Are you the guy that the lenders call and you kind of handpick the appraisers for them to work with in those areas?
Good question. No, actually, nobody really knows what I do. It's a big scam, the whole thing. No, not at all. No, so I've got some folks on my team that do an amazing job of appraiser selection. We use a lot of data and analytics to do that, making sure we're assigning the appropriate appraiser to the appropriate property and all that good stuff. What I do is I work directly with the mortgage brokers, with the mortgage lenders, banks, credit unions, all the different partners that we work with throughout the country. But my territory being the Southeast, that's my focus. So I spend a lot of time with our broker partners, with our loan officers, doing trainings for realtors, going out, meeting with credit unions, banks, all these different folks that are making decisions on what appraisal management company they're going to be working with, and convincing them that NAN obviously is the best to work with. So.
And they are. I can vouch for them 100%.
Wow, appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I would back that as well.
There
I mean,
you go.
we were talking about it off camera, and I just had an appraisal done by NAN, and they were fantastic, quick, efficient, and
Well, we appreciate
luckily
that.
I got the numbers back I wanted to, so that didn't hurt.
I didn't know. I had no idea I was coming on the podcast.
So Tyler, as a mortgage lender, do you guys all mortgage companies have to go through NAN when ordering appraisal?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's not like 2004, because my Uncle Johnny and my cousin Tony were the appraisers. I don't know what happened.
No, we definitely have selections of appraisal management companies that we can use. And again, we base it off the experience we have with each of these companies we work with. And NAN, I can just tell you since 2021, using them from then on, they're my preferred go-to. And it's due to communication, speed, and accuracy. I think that is just, you compare to other appraisal management companies we work with, they're pretty consistent. So that's why we got a lot of love, and we send the majority of the deals to them. So.
And I would say, just to add to that, thank you very much, Tyler. Appreciate that. But I think to add to that is one of the things that appraisal management companies do is they ideally want to be a conveyor belt piece of the process. Mm-hmm. You order your appraisal, appraiser goes out, makes the report, we QC it, make sure everything's good, and send the appraisal back out to the lender. But when something doesn't go right, when a value is incorrect because data is missed, or a square footage is incorrect based on something that was provided, whatever, if something goes wrong and that lender needs support, that's where NAN really shines. Because you can pick up the phone, call the team, call myself, call anybody on our team, and they solve that problem for you quickly and efficiently. And that, I think, is really where some of the other competitors that I work with, or work against, I suppose, in that case, have a little bit different approach. Our approach is, hey, look, if you've got a problem, we want to fix it. We want to take accountability. We want to find a solution for you and do that. I think that's what you've experienced
100%.
Probably more than
just pick up
the
the phone
day-to-day.
call, and they're so responsive, and again, it helps that they get the job done right. So, yeah.
That's great, because imagine trying to get in contact with an appraiser when it comes back short $100,000. You're like, who do I call? The 1-800 number, nobody's.
Well, and communication is such a big thing.
100%.
And the companies you're working with putting forth effort, because we had an appraiser come out on an investment property, appraised really, really low. We were questioning comps being inferior, and the attitude, his approach towards the whole entire conversation was just really, really off-putting. Right. So the investor just ended up paying more out of pocket versus fighting the appraisal. Yeah. Which is kind of the only one who loses there is the investor. And it's the lender you choose, and again, the appraisal processing company and the appraiser that goes out there, and those things are so crucial
A
and
lot of moving
important.
parts.
People don't,
Absolutely.
agents and consumers, I think, don't understand how important those things behind the scenes are.
Yeah.
And
You
I think
know?
one of the components that we kind of set the conversation to start here a little bit is those appraisers are independent contractors for
Third
us.
party, yeah.
They don't work for me.
Yeah.
They work on our behalf, and we work with them.
Yeah.
They're partners. They're not employees.
Yep.
And I think that's a big factor that a lot of realtors don't understand,
Yep.
borrowers don't understand, and oftentimes as the loan officer broker, they're going to get a call saying, you picked this guy and you picked this woman and now I have to deal with this problem. Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, that lands on my doorstep, and that's where we start to partner with them and making sure our appraisers are partners and not just, well, we hate the AMC, but we have to use this system kind of
Absolutely.
thing. We want them to work with us, and they enjoy working with us. So quite a few years ago, we started a process where we found out the average time from the time an inspection was done, the day you do your work, from the time they did the inspection to the time they got paid, the national average was somewhere between 30 and 45 days.
Yep.
That's a long time to
is.
get paid and wait for a paycheck to
Right.
pay for gas or food or whatever you're doing.
Right.
So what we found was, okay, let's make this better for our appraiser partners. If they come in on time or early, if they communicate, keep in touch with us, do all the things we ask them to do, we pay them the next day.
Wow.
Right.
That's
Deposit.
huge. That's
So
huge.
as long as everything comes in and we've got the report, they get a paycheck the next day.
Yeah.
So that made a lot of our appraisers very happy with working with us.
I imagine.
And
yeah.
it improved our relationships with them dramatically. So that's one factor that really kind of set us apart. Now, some
that's
other
really
folks
awesome.
I think are now doing that. But,
One of the hot topics we get from agents when we've been asking around is, the process of if an appraisal comes short and the option for a
Reconsideration.
seller is called a reconsideration, right? Kind of like challenging the initial appraisal amount. When they do that, who does that go to? Does that go to that initial appraiser that came to the property,
right.
and they handle that part, or does it reach up to your level?
It's a great question. And the piece of that is something that kind of I pride ourselves on because I think it's a good one. And we have on-staff appraisers that work on the NAN team dedicated to do this process. They review appraisals for all different kinds of reasons, reconsideration of value being one of them. And so if your value doesn't come in, you submit that back and say, hey, we don't like this. There were comps that were missed, and these were some updated information that took place prior to the inspection date. Let's make sure we note that because we can't do things that have taken place after. And then Tyler would send that over to the team. And what happens first is my team takes a review of that file, and they look at it objectively and just say, all right, what's going on? Do we see that there's any holes in this appraisal report, any problems, any discrepancies? And then at that point, they pick up the phone and call that original appraiser. Hey, Bob, hey, Sally, whoever, want to talk to you about comp number 2. I've been provided information from the realtor, from the loan officer, whoever, and it shows here that this comp was closer and more similar to the subject, which is a key factor if you're ever thinking about that. Closer and more similar is a very good factor to think about. And then they had that conversation. So what we found after doing that for a few years and seeing that process go through, we were finding 25, 27, almost 30% of our reconsideration of values were coming back with improvements.
Oh, wow.
It may not be a exact value or $100,000 back
An
or
adjustment
something,
there, though.
but you're seeing an adjustment and improvement in value from that initial report. And that just goes to show how valuable conversation takes place.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
this
awesome.
conversation, we're hearing things, we're learning about each other. It's the same thing with an appraiser. I didn't know, I was in a rush that day, like something happened personally, whatever,
Yeah.
and I just missed something. Okay,
Right.
great, we're able to move it.
Yeah.
And the other good thing about that is if for some reason that appraiser doesn't make that change, that other 70% of the time, and that percentage doesn't change or that value doesn't change, you've now had 2 appraisers licensed, reviewed that appraisal. You now have 5, 6, 7 comps to look at. Now you've got a negotiation piece to say, all right, sellers, buyers, look, we don't know what we're going to do here, but if you walk away from this deal the way it is now, the next buyer is going to come along and the comps are going to be the same.
Yeah.
the same data is going to be used,
Yep.
and we're going to be having the same conversation in a month or whatever.
Yep.
Do you really want to go through that, or do we talk about a value change
Yep.
here?
So,
And that gives you that backup data to have.
Right.
that.
and I assume in a situation like this, when we're trying to get a reconsideration, let's say like improvements have been made to the home, if the seller were to provide like a list and like dates of like improvements that have been made, that will definitely help in reconsideration.
That would help, and that also would help in a situation, let's say you're talking about you were doing a lot of investor deals, and
Yep.
you have somebody doing a fix and flip type of property where they've put in $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 into a property to bring it up to speed. Those are best handled by providing that stuff up front. Provide those, get that stuff to the
Right off
appraiser
the
up
bat,
front and
yeah.
say, here's what they've put into this house.
Yep.
We know it sold 8 months ago for $40,000. Now it's worth $150 because here's the receipts, here's what we did to the floor plan, those kind of things, and we permitted all this stuff, and being able to see that ahead of time helps.
And that's what I was going to say. I think, for investors, the big thing to remember is if you really want it to count on an appraisal, it's important to permit it.
Yeah.
For
It really is.
it's some cosmetic stuff, cabinets, things like that. No, you don't necessarily need a permit for those things. But if you're doing general alterations, adding square footage, and you want it to count, which was something we talked about off camera, I'm sure we'll bring up in a little bit, it's really important to pull general alteration permits, roof permits, electrical permits, because that's how an appraiser and also the county appraiser is going to assess the value of your structure and property.
And I would suggest to that, that's a great point. You're exactly right. Permit those things, but I would suggest that because of the fact that permitting process is taking a long time, as we know with the storms, and,
It can,
and just
yeah.
in general,
It definitely
can
can.
take some time. If they're putting that house on the market and it sells quickly, and somebody's got an offer in, and we want to get that thing moving, and we're doing an appraisal, well, that permitting might not be in public records yet.
Right.
So we don't know that information yet, and the appraiser can't find it.
Yep.
So that's why we provide that ahead of time.
Yeah.
So we can see that, check and verify, and then that helps with that.
Other than like providing lists of improvements and the obvious like keeping the house maintained and clean and everything like that, what other things should a seller do to prepare their home for an appraisal to get like the best appraisal results?
Great question. So a lot of times, and realtors often ask this question because they need to know. They walk into a listing, they say, okay, what do we got here? How many square feet? What's our plan? What are we going to assess the value at? They're looking at price per square foot, which is not a structure or not a model that the appraisers use, but it's a good model for realtors to use. So what you want to look for is, I use this story a lot. My wife and I went to Italy, I guess it was last year, and we were there for. Yeah, it was
He's
great.
Italian right here.
Hey, I don't buonasera. I don't have a lot. I didn't learn much. The food was great. But I didn't-
Around the wine.
Fantastic.
And the wine.
yeah, right. The wine.
And everything's inexpensive. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So we were there for about 3 weeks, and it was fantastic. I had a great vacation. But we were, all these different places, and we saw this marble manufacturing, where they pull out the marble out of the mountains, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
quarry. Thank you. And I thought, here's a good example. I could go to this quarry, and I could go find an Italian sculptor and have a 6-foot model made of my wife. She's a beautiful woman. I love her to death. We've been married 25 years. And I build this, have this made, cost me probably $50,000, $60,000 probably, I don't know. Then ship it to the United States. I've got this beautiful foyer in my house. I could have it mounted there, concrete built into the floor, some lighting. It would be amazing. Now, if you bought my house, I'm going to expect that $100,000, $60,000 back out of my value, right? Now, I'm sure you probably think my wife is beautiful, but she might not be your type, But the ultimate answer is, it's beautiful to me,
Yeah.
and what beautiful to me might not be beautiful to
Yeah,
the next person.
Right.
So the idea of a hot tub right next to the bed where you step out, or carpeted bathrooms, or wall-to-wall ceiling carpet, or mirrors, or you've seen all these weird
The
things.
1970s existed.
You're exactly right. You're exactly
They
right.
still exist in some
So
places.
I've seen appraisals that
Yeah.
they do exist.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question, a long way around, is looking at standard basic things. You're
Yep.
looking at appliances. You're looking at builder grade versus custom.
Yep.
You're looking at the flooring style and what's been used. Something that's interesting to me that I learned quite a few years ago, but I didn't agree with, and it took me a long time to understand it, was a roof. A roof is a maintenance item. And so as consumers, if we're all going out today to shop for a house, and the seller tells us the roof is a year old, to us as consumers, that's a bonus.
yeah.
That's a good deal.
It is.
Right? I've got a $50,000-$60,000 roof, $40,000 roof, whatever it is, brand new, more or
But
less.
that is a couple bucks off its actual value.
It is.
overall.
It is, right. And so because of the fact that I would buy a house that has at least 5 years of life left in it, there's no value differential.
Wow.
There's no value differential in appraisal because it's a maintenance issue. So to us as consumers, we see the value, but in appraisal, it's a maintenance issue. Just maintain it. And so it
Oh, so
has
no added
it has
value to
life.
having a brand new roof.
it has
Anyway.
life and it exists
Fine.
and it will be fine and it's
So
brand
it's
new.
longer
it's
than
fine.
5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the current standard.
Okay.
FHA
cool.
might be different, but yeah, I think it's the current standard is 5 years. So, yeah.
And we had a conversation off camera just a while ago about what's the proper way to approach an appraiser for a realtor to approach appraiser when the appraiser is coming out
Oh.
to the property. I think this is a big one.
This is a good one for
We've
our
had a
realtor.
couple of those
Yeah,
conversations.
Yeah.
Listen up.
Awkward.
for our realtor friends, we will talk about that. So something that's interesting is a lot of realtors feel like there's this behind the curtain with the realtor. They're not really sure what to do, how to do it. And they oftentimes will attend the appraisal, open the house, whatever they need to do, which is great. And we appreciate that. The thing that's different between appraiser or realtor A and realtor B, realtor A will show up with a stack of every property that's sold in that house since 1978 and show them the trends and I've done all the work for you. Here you go. Let me shove this in your face. So you don't have to do it. I've already done it.
I just got you a free paycheck.
Yeah, and I picked out the ones that you don't need to worry about, right? Ignore those other ones. I took those out. Versus the other appraiser or realtor B that shows up and says, hey, thanks so much for coming today, being on time. If you need anything, I'll be in the car. But I wanted to let you know one thing. The house 2 doors down that's probably going to look like a comp was a divorce situation, and the ex-wife came through the house with a sledgehammer and knocked all the walls out, and so it ended up selling as a distressed sale, but it was cash, so it was a little bit different. Just didn't want you to not be aware of that because the appraiser can only see the outside comp information.
Yep.
He's not going in the home, so wouldn't have known that information. Or there may have been some sinkhole damage or something, some unknown that wouldn't necessarily be available MLS, public records type of stuff. That's where a realtor can really make an impact to an appraiser. At the end of the day, appraiser independence, air compliance, all this good stuff makes the appraiser not have to take or accept any of that information that's provided.
Yep.
They can do their own research, they can do their own due diligence to verify all that stuff. But oftentimes they will tell you, we appreciate that when it's valuable information.
Yeah.
When it's just, here's a bunch of listings I've closed in this neighborhood, they're going to see that anyway. And if you're pushy about it and kind of trying to tell them how to do their job, that's when it gets a little hairy.
Good luck.
I usually just, instead of shoving like a CMA in an appraiser's face, I'll usually reach out to them after they call me to schedule, and I'll say, hey, do you mind if I get your email, and would it be okay if I sent you a couple recently sold comps that I think are like kind to the property in the area? If that's
And that's
all right
a
with
great
you.
approach.
And I think it's like you said, you don't want to just be like, here you go, like this is everything that's sold. You want to
That's
be
insulting.
very
Yes.
if they want to take the information, great. If they don't want to take it, okay, because again, they don't have to. So you want to give them the option more than anything, you know?
And it's just a common courtesy,
Yeah,
right?
it
I
is.
wouldn't come to your job and tell you how to do it no more than you would come mine.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what's they're stepping on toes a
Exactly.
little bit because they cross paths a little
Yep.
bit with what they do.
Right.
That's why. Yeah. That's a great question though, because I do think a lot of realtors struggle with that. I just don't go, or I do go and I get over aggressive and they, you know, it's just they want to get it done.
They're like,
We all
oh,
wanna get it.
that's how you do kung fu, huh? That's your way. No. A couple other great questions that people were asking. Look, so recently we've had the hurricanes here in Tampa Bay, and what we're seeing that a lot of those properties that were waterfront, they got damaged and flooded out. A lot of them, maybe they were already paid for. Maybe older family lived there, owned it for probably 30 years, and then now they're just in a space where they don't want to rehab it. So what's going on that we're seeing is they're selling the cash to investors, probably for 50% value or 60 or 40% value. People are like, what would happen? Because we're dealing with these homeowners, so we're trying to say how do we put a value on those homes that are distressed, right?
Yeah.
That's one part to it is how should we go with the approach of how to put a value on that home that is distressed, and what happens when you have like 5 homes on one street that are sold for discounted prices, and there's been no comps in the past year, right, of traditional resale, and now when they go to sale, are those going to be the new comps for that neighborhood, or does that affect the comps?
So we're going to see a lot of kind of new territory to cross in the Pinellas County area, in the Tampa market and the waterfront areas where we haven't seen that before in our area. We've seen it in Fort Myers, Naples, because of some storms there. South Florida, we've seen it there as well. But looking here, we're seeing some different things. And a lot of people have talked about this 50-50 FEMA rule, the 49% FEMA rule, all these different things. And so there's a little bit of backstory to get to that answer. So a lot of what happened when the storms took place, you've got these homes that were annihilated, smashed to pieces. It was terrible watching all that stuff happen. And so now these people, a lot of the municipalities and counties weren't sure what to do yet. They hadn't ever experienced this level of decimation in their market, and so it was a little bit unnerving for them to try to do it. And I was just speaking with Mike Twitty last week, or this week actually, at an event, and he was telling me that they've been struggling trying to get some of those things rolled out to help people to really make this impact lessen for them. So because of these FEMA rules, this 50-50 rule is you're looking at a property, and as that property has a value, they have to do what's called a retrospective appraisal. That retrospective appraisal, not a lot of appraisers feel comfortable doing because it's a little risky. What you're doing is you're going back and saying, before October 1st or October 15th or whenever the date was that we had these storms, you go back in time and say, all right, well, hypothetically, this property would have been in its perfect form worth this much. And then based on that, you have to come up with how much damage has been done, and is it 50% or 51% of the rebuild cost? And if not, you have to bring it up to code, raise it, demolish it completely, and start over. So there's a lot of that going on right now. So that piece alone is monumental. I mean, that's a massive piece. Now, you're saying, and this happened when we had Ian down south a few years ago, and that was something I heard a lot about, where investors just came in, and I was talking to a real friend of mine. He said his phone is coming both ways. I want out of here. I don't ever want to deal with these hurricanes. And somebody from Michigan saying, I got an opportunity to buy a cheap house on the water, right? So activity is really starting to churn up. And so as we see that, we're seeing, okay, in South Florida, I know that in the Fort Myers area, you had investors coming in and saying, ma'am, you're 82 years old. It's going to take you a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years to rebuild this thing. We can give you cash today, and you can go and buy something away from the water, and we'll take care of this for you. You don't have to wait for the insurance claims, all this stuff to deal with. We'll handle it. And they were taking offers all day long, which is where we get to our question. So the idea there is you've got 5 houses now on the same street that have now been demolished, rebuilt. It depends a lot, and I know this is a vague answer. I'm taking a long way to get here, but the answer really is going to be dependent upon what happens. Because if you've got 5 houses, this one decides to build it up and put it on stilts and start over kind of at that level. This one decides to rehab it and fix it the way it is because it was 48%, and they fix it. And then the next one demolishes and goes all the way up and starts all over with a McMansion thing. Well, now you've got a real tricky scenario of 3 houses here to find. What you're going to have to do is go distance. You're going to have to go find other places that are comparable, because each one of those 3 houses, as I described, are different scenarios that are ultimately going to be different comps. They wouldn't be the same comp for all 3. So there will be some variance for sure. And the lenders are going to have to be involved in this process as well to help guide to say what they're going to be willing to accept, because of the way that the storm took out massive numbers of homes in a very remote area, or not remote, close area, right? All these homes were all within this county or two. You look down probably from Sarasota, Venice, up through Newport Richey-ish is where the majority of the damage came from the second storm. Helene, I think, was more further north and kind of here up. But either way, it's going to be tricky, and we haven't seen enough appraisals done in those markets yet because they're still digging out. I mean, it's still really bad. So it's not something yet that's really been addressed exactly. But ultimately, those comps are going to be a little bit different, and you're going to have to find more information about the property as to what took place here. Did they demo? Is this just full renovation, or whatever. Because one of the questions that was asked at this meeting I was at this week was lifting a home, that below grade, or the downstairs, if you will, the garage, carport, we all, the house I'm talking about, that's included in the GLA, but you can't close it in and build it. And so many of these homes around here were closed in and built. And so there's no value given. Insurance isn't giving value. It's just a totally different layout for that bottom floor with the breakaway walls and all that stuff. That was the reason they were there. But people would put big screen TVs and pool tables, and it was a great place to hang out.
Yep.
But now that's gone, and people are having trouble. Wait, I lost a...
I invested $50,000 in my man cave down
Yes.
here, and now it's washed away.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
when it comes to the values, we have a lot of people that do convert those basements or those first floor levels, the garages. They'll enclose them. They do create like a man cave, or a second living room,
Extra bedrooms,
Yeah.
sure.
When those come to, but when you go on the property appraiser website, it doesn't look like it's counting that as heated square footage, right?
Correct.
So when it comes to appraisals, when you have a house that has the man cave, it looks like a living room, feels like a living
does,
room,
yeah.
TVs everywhere, and then the next house, it's just like a empty garage. When it comes to are they going to get any value back from
It doesn't.
that
Yeah,
bottom
it
floor?
typically doesn't work that way because it's not usable space. They've made it into usable space.
Right.
Yeah.
It's part of the GLA, the gross living area, but it's not going to be given extra bedroom space or overall square footage. It's just it's because it's not insurable space. It can't be used,
Sure,
and that's why you're seeing that. Hey, it's a 3,000 square foot house when you walk and measure it, but when you look at the public records, it's 1,700 square feet. That's why, because that below non-insurable areas.
It just really comes down insurable is really
Yeah.
the main question of why, and it's interesting.
And it's very tricky because our market, I mean, you were talking earlier about Newport Richey area up that way, but all the way down the coast of Florida, many, many homes are built that way.
Yeah.
Very much, that's the way the design is.
Yeah, we talked about condos too. That's been a hot topic for
Oh,
the
yeah.
past few years.
Yep.
What do you see in the condo market for the appraisal aspect of things like that right now? It's like we're seeing a lot of price drops on condos, unfortunately.
You guys have any questions? Anything else? I'd rather not. No, condos are tricky. Condos are tricky. They're a hard one because of the fact that we had the Sunrise tragedy. Sunrise, is that right?
Surfside.
Surfside. Thank you.
Yep.
The Surfside tragedy, that really brought a lot of attention to the condos, as it should have, and as it needed to be. And a lot of associations for condominiums were not up to snuff. They were run by mom and pop. They were, shoestring together, and that needed to be addressed. And we've addressed a lot of that. And I know the governor and the state have worked really hard to find a solution there. And it got really, it's still very political, and it's very,
touchy subject.
it's a touchy subject, right?
Yeah.
And the question I have, and I don't think, and this is me speaking, but I don't know that there is a solution that's easy here, because if you say, well, we've got to have $250,000 tomorrow to get this condo up to snuff, or else all these people have to move out.
Right.
Well, you might have had people living in there since the 60s or 70s
Right.
that are just on Social Security and have no way to pay an assessment
Right.
of $30,000-$40,000 or higher.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, if you're an investor and you want to buy a property in there, well, what am I getting into?
Yeah.
I might not be able to sell this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, I want to sell my condo and get out of it. Well, nobody wants to buy it because the association has these assessments against this property, and it's only a $200,000 condo, but yet it's selling for $300,000 because there's an assessment on it. And some of these things can happen that cause some challenges. But from the appraisal side, we really don't have that many issues overall,
Yep.
because we know that the value is what the value is. You get some of these squirrely ones where you start seeing Airbnbs and rental desks, and then lenders get squirrely about that. They don't like that.
Right.
We get condotel type of things. But really, from an appraisal standpoint, you're doing walls in, and it's just,
The usual,
it's
right?
pretty basic. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I mean, I'm not simplifying that process. I mean, the condos can be challenging, but from the appraisal side, it's not that difficult. I know
Yeah.
from the lending side,
Oh, it's a
there's a
different
lot
animal.
going on with the condo.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
100%.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, overall, condos are still, they're out there, but that's where the due diligence of the appraiser, whether it be residential condo or residential single family,
Yeah.
that really makes a difference, because if I don't know that there are these assessments, or if I don't know that there's 30% rental capacity, and I just send you a appraisal, can be a problem. You miss out on things. So that's why we try to make sure we're informing them. And as a lender, you want to make sure you're letting us know as much as you know about the property up front, so that we can pass it on to the appraiser, because that's important. That if you know something that we don't, let's all share that information. It's okay.
Yeah.
Details. That's what I'm listening to. So yeah.
In a changing market, like I feel like we're in a phase where maybe values, we're going through a phase right now. Properties are staying on the market longer.
A little bit, yeah.
Values are, with the hurricane, obviously different things are happening in the neighborhoods. How long do value appraisals stick to a property?
So typically that's going to be a lender-specific guideline. Most of the time they're about 120 days. I know the FHAs are 180, right?
180.
Yeah.
VA and FHA.
Yeah, government loans are 180, and they stay with the property. So if you have an FHA appraisal done on a property, and the value comes in, let's say $300,000, that property is now worth $300,000 tied to that appraisal for the next 6 months. So
no matter who appraises it, or just only if FHA comes?
That appraisal stays with it. So if I'm the buyer and I want to buy the house for $300,000, the appraisal comes in at $300,000, and for some reason, I got fired from my job and I can't buy the house. So now Tyler comes along, wants to buy that house. Well, here's the appraisal. It goes with that property. It's $300,000. So you know already, right? That sticks with that property. That's part of that that FHA process.
Got it. What's your thoughts on should we encourage homeowners to get pre-appraisals? Like, should they hire a private appraisal? Does that really stick, or like?
Does it help?
Does it help if they get an appraisal done before listing a home?
I think it's not a bad thing in certain situations, and I know that's kind of a get out of jail kind of answer, but I think the idea is it can be very beneficial if you have. My boss uses this analogy often. Let's say you have a property in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's 12 acres, octagon home with a pickleball court. That's an outlier type of property.
Yeah.
It's not a typical
Right.
standard run-of-the-mill HUD or PUD type neighborhood type house. So that kind of property, you don't really know what you're looking at, because the comps are going to be really challenging, if at all available, right? So those are challenging ones, outlier type properties. If you're in a, I don't know, let's use a D.R. Horton type of neighborhood where you've got a standard national builder. They build 300 units in a property, and they're all the same, more or less, 3 different models, and that's it. I don't know that you really need I would agree. But the idea is, I don't know that you need a value. I think there's enough online data that your lending partner and your realtor should be able to put together from a consumer standpoint to be able to say it's not necessary. If you have a big custom-built home that you did a lot of upgrades on, and you want to make sure you get some of that money back, and you think, but I have my Italian, statue of my wife, I want to make sure I get all that. We know that's not going to work, but we also know that there are customizations that are upgrades that have been made that you want to make sure, hey, what would this be? Maybe people just want to know, maybe I'm going to put the house on the market, maybe I'm not. Let me just find out.
Right.
Am I upside down? Am I in good equity position?
Right.
Can I make enough money to buy the next house before I move?
Yeah.
Kind of figuring that stuff out. It just kind of depends on the scenario. I would definitely not consider having every consumer do it, because it would just be wasteful. But in certain circumstances, definitely has a place. Yeah, for sure.
No, that's nice.
And maybe investors. I know some certain sellers will do that, but overall, I don't think I'd do it with everybody.
Right. Even if they got one done, it's not like they could go to the official appraiser comes and says, no, the house appraised for this much.
Right. Great question.
Right.
So yeah, and that's a good point, because that appraisal, I often get those calls where it's like, we did an appraisal before and it was 400 and you said it's 380. What happened? What's going on? This isn't fair. This isn't right. They use okay. Provide us that. Let's take a look. Did they use a similar comps? Did something happen between the time you did your appraisal and we did ours?
Right.
Maybe that was a 3-week window and there was a couple houses that sold in distress or brought the value down, or maybe it went up. You don't know. So they look at that information. The lender provides that over to my team, and then we take a look at it. And then if we need to, we get with that appraiser. But oftentimes they're pretty close.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, that's if you mentioned about the 16 acre. How do you appraise something like that? When you have we have a 5 acre lot, right? But there's not 5 acres. There might be a 2 acre here and a 16 acre there.
Yeah.
Do we just divide it per square foot per lot of the recent vacant lots that sold, or?
So you're looking at the usability of the property. You want to look at if you've got a 5 acre, a 10 acre, and an 8 acre. Maybe those are your best comps available.
There's a whole lot buildable.
You want to look at the lot, but you also want to look at I mean, we're not talking about land only here. We're talking about a house on this land, right?
Right.
Yes,
might be a pond in there, a lake, or
not many of that in this
trees.
market, but you go up to the center of the state, further south, you'd see
Ocala.
something like that. Ocala, right? Exactly, horse farms, those kind of things. But if you look at the idea, you're generally looking at, I've got a 3,000 square foot house. All right, I've got a 2,800 square foot house, and I've got a 3,200 square foot house. Kind of bracketed that information there. I've got the houses are about the same.
Within 400 square
They're
feet.
slightly off in acreage. So what the appraiser will do is they'll make adjustments. They'll make a negative or a positive adjustment for example, I was working on an appraisal yesterday. It was up in Massachusetts, and it was had a pool, and the pool was a pond. Let's call it what it was. It was a mess. It had been there. It had been covered for a lot of years. Looked like maybe a senior citizen or someone had lived there and hadn't used it. And what had happened was the water had collected on the cover, fallen in, and filled up with rainwater over the years, and literally had trees growing out of it. It was a mess, right?
Yeah.
So it was a lot going on there, and it was
wild.
Yeah, it was really wild. And the appraiser gave value to this hole in the ground pool that was there because you wouldn't have to dig out a pool to start a pool in this market, right? So there was value there. But what happened was you saw the next comp, the very first comp, had a pool as well. Great. It was looking at the pictures of that comp. It actually had a nice, clean, swimmable pool, something that you'd want to get in.
Yeah.
And that they took $15,000 off of that as an adjustment from the $20,000 they gave over here. So you saw an adjustment that was made to adjust off. This is what a real pool would cost. This is what this thing costs. Same thing goes with this acreage, right? Back to the question is, you've got 15 acres, 10 acres, 8 acres. Okay, we've adjusted down or up accordingly to make the properties kind of equal, to give you an average, if you will, of what those look like. It's not exact science, but it's that accuracy is there based on those adjustments.
Is there a max how far they could go in distance? Like, could they go 15 miles away if there was no comps close by, or does it have to be like within a 5 mile?
Well, I'll ask a couple more questions.
And maybe North Carolina is different than Tampa, right?
We were talking about like Ocala a minute ago. I was looking at a house that was on 2,900 acres the other day.
Woo! That's like half of Ocala.
Yeah, seriously.
That's a lot of acres.
Yeah.
Well, that would be
Like it had a whole ski lake just for the property.
that would be a totally different type of appraisal.
Okay.
That wouldn't be a traditional residential appraisal.
Right.
That would be very, very specific.
Yeah.
And there would be surveys
Had
and
like
all kinds of
hunting
things that had
blinds and 18
Yeah,
inch
for
trails
sure.
and like a 12,000 square foot European
Right.
house.
Yeah, no,
on
that
it.
would be totally different type of appraisal. But to your question, how far can I go? Depends on where you are. So we're here today in Tampa, and if you went 5 miles south of here, you'd be in what, Ruskin? I don't know how far.
Yeah, right.
Maybe something like that.
River U.S.
Yeah, you'd go pretty far, and you'd pass a lot of homes, between here and there.
Exactly.
Now, if you go to Ocala, in certain parts of Ocala, for example, you could go 5 miles and pass 2 houses.
Really
So
based on density.
It's density, exactly right. And so because of that, lenders will often say, oh, well, there's a 1 mile, you can't go outside of 1 mile. Well, that's a general rule of typical suburban areas because there should be enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just kind of a word of mouth rule, but it's not really a rule because it depends on where you are.
Yeah,
It
makes
absolutely
sense.
depends on where you are.
Makes sense.
If you have to pass 30 homes to get to a comp that matches the subject property, what's going on there? Why are we skipping over all these others? Are you trying to find a value in a certain... Now, if it's a 8,000 square foot house
And a
in
1,000.
South St. Pete,
Right.
and there's nothing close to that until you get to Clearwater, well, maybe now you have to think about that. You have to look at that a little bit differently.
Could be considered.
It could be considered. It's a lot of factors there, but definitely if you're passing over things to get to something,
Right.
that's going to raise red flags because people are going to say, well, why are you missing these other things that are in between?
Right.
So you mentioned that property we were talking about earlier was be like a different kind of appraisal. You know, some people are buying 1,000-acre estates, some people are buying townhouses in South Tampa, some people are buying trailers. Are there different types of appraisals, and like how does a seller know like what kind of appraisal they need for their property?
So a couple things, yes, there absolutely are different reports. There's a 1004, there's a 1025, 1073, 1004D, all these. I can't
whole
name them all.
list.
Like,
Yeah.
there's a stack of lists.
Yeah.
And it's specific to the type of property, and then it's also specific to the type of appraisal report the lender's requesting. There's an AVM, there's a BPO, there's all these different hybrid appraisals that are out now.
Yep.
So there's different variations depending on what your DU findings might tell you that are required. You might get a property inspection waiver, property inspection plus, what is it?
ACE.
ACE plus PDR, thank you. So these different hybrid appraisals, so there are definitely different types. Ultimately, the seller wouldn't need to know about that. The buyer and the lender would work that out and be able to order the correct appraisal, because they're not going to order the wrong appraisal and then come back and say, see, we got the value because of this appraisal type instead of this. They would, no, it's apples and oranges. It wouldn't change that. It would we would stop it. The lender would stop it. Everybody'd stop it and say, no, you ordered a condo appraisal, and this is a single family resident type appraisal. It would just be different. And that one, I'd have to find out, but that 2,900 square foot or 2,900 acre property would be some sort of really, probably have
Agriculture
multiple
loan
appraisers involved.
or
and different
agriculture
things.
appraisal or
Yeah,
something
land
like that.
only type of thing or something.
It's a buy, Jeff. Go and buy it. It's a one of one.
Yeah, come on.
$28 million.
Let's split on that. I need some hunting land, right? That's great.
There's definitely pigs and deers up there. So.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
The I know we've come in recent years. I know I've came across it. You guys probably have as well. We're in the neighborhood, 2 maybe 1,200 square feet. Nothing is sold in the past 6 months, and it's kind of, we might have answered that already. But let's just say there's a 1,000 square foot home, 2 or let's just say 1,400 square foot home, 2 and there's been no activity in this neighborhood. It's a desirable area. There's just been no sales. Do we keep going out until we see some sales? In let's just say it's Pasco County, in Hudson, Holiday, or something like that.
So back to his condo question. I don't really want to answer that. It's a tricky one, right? Because there are neighborhoods and scenarios like that are. I know I've got a client that's on the other coast that I get a lot of these kind of in that Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach area where these really exclusive, kind of nice higher end neighborhoods. People don't move out of them, and if they do, it's cash sales, and they don't even come on the market.
Most of those people die in their house.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there, but I think you're right though, because there are specific neighborhoods where it's tricky to find comps, and I've seen situations where the appraiser has done all they can, no more blood from the turnip kind of thing, and just said, this is all I can get, this is all we've got available, and either the lender won't allow them to go beyond a certain radius, or the adjustments are so great that it doesn't really become a comp anymore. Remember we talked about comps before with the adjustments on the pool and the different variations. Well, if you've got 2 1,400 square feet, and the only comp that's been sold in the last 6-8 months, a year, was a 3,000 square foot 5-bedroom home,
Right.
I got to adjust down a lot.
Like, can we even use that?
Yeah, those aren't going to come together as real comps, and I can try to provide that as a report. The lender's going to stop that in its tracks and say, no way, not even close. Go find something better. There's a rare occasion where that just becomes a real sticking point in making it a difficult property to sell. There's not always a perfect answer to that question, but it can definitely become difficult.
So agents just have to be just as creative as the appraisers. We're kind of all looking at the same data, and we kind of have to try to piece it together and come back to communication with the appraisers. Like, hey, this. Well,
and that's a scenario where I was a wholesale account executive for a long time before I got on the appraisal side of the house, and so when I was doing that, I understood, and I would oftentimes not really understand the relationship between realtors and brokers, realtors and loan officers, all that, because I feel like if you have a property like what we're talking about and you need some help on it, you need to pick up the phone and call the lender and say, I need some help here. What do we got? Tyler can pick up the phone and call me and say, Jason, we've got a weird one here. Can you have one of your staff appraisers take a look? I can pull somebody from my team on a call. We can take a deep dive on it. We can't do a pencil search like we used to in the old days, but we can give some understanding and go, yeah, this is going to be tricky. We'll get an appraiser out there and take a look at it, but we don't know. And going in, you can inform the borrower that, hey, look, this could be really tricky. There might be some trouble with the value here because of comps available or because of the type of property or, it's an octagon house that, on 12 acres, right? Like we've got those weird ones. So having those relationships and having that communication, because a lot of times loan officers, realtors, a lot of people in this industry as a whole get out on these islands and think I can do it all myself, which sometimes they do very, very successfully. But having partners that you can work with to be able to go through some of these processes and these challenges come up makes you more efficient and better at what you're doing to be able to kind of.
Good answer. Yeah.
And I can vouch that they go above me on Jason and his team because I had a situation out in St. Pete where it was an ADU add-on and it had 2 meters and I was saving the deal for the client, right? They had a previous lender, previous appraisal, and that appraisal came in low. And I think it was a single family home with the ADU, but the other appraisal that came in was a multi-unit, right? So the appraisal came in low, and I was able to pick up the phone with Jason and his team, say, hey, this is the situation. It has 2 meters, but it is an actual single-family home, zone single-family home. Got the right appraiser to come out, gave the value of what we needed. So they saved the deal, and it was a nice.
And I think that was a great example of getting that communication up front. So that when we engage the appraiser and call the appraiser, say, hey, 123 Main Street needs an appraisal, and by the way, here's some challenges and things that you might see, then this is what we're dealing with. This is here's the information. You go figure it out, but here's what we go, what you're walking into and not, just blindly hoping they get it right. And it's definitely a good point that you talk about the ADUs. Something they're doing, I know in Pinellas County, I'm not sure about Hillsborough yet, but I know Pinellas is doing it, is St. Petersburg is starting to rezone their ADUs as well as other parts of the county. And so by rezoning those ADUs, that's going to help bringing some of those properties that have been difficult to sell because of comps, because of permitting, because of these different things. If they can rezone and bring them up to permit, this
awesome.
This mother-in-law suite over the garage that's been there since the 70s, now all of a sudden has a different value scope that you can now use to sell that home. And and especially post-COVID where we saw a lot of multifamily becoming,
huge.
Mom and dad moving in or kids moving back in or whatever, and having that spaces available to now be used appropriately versus, Uncle Joe built it and didn't permit it. It was a shed that he bought from Home Depot and put sheetrock up and hoped it, called it a house. You've got to know that those are, there's certain things about those ADUs that you need to be officially a quote unquote ADU, but having that will bring some dramatic value improvement on some of those properties down there.
Great opportunity for the people in Pinellas County.
And I want to give a shout out to Jason because he comes from the mortgage background, so he's always, he's for the mortgage, loan officers. That's why I got so much love and respect for NAN and what he represents. And just want to point out he has a mean shoe game as well. You gotta show your shoes, man. You gotta show your shoes.
Oh, these are my red ones today.
Look at that.
Yeah, he's clean.
Right?
The best shoe game for the appraisal, man. I love it.
That's funny. That's funny.
A couple years ago, and this may be just 8 years ago, when I was really just getting in the business, I felt like we had access to little cheat sheets of how much would an extra bedroom bring value or extra pool. Is there anything like that as a type of sheet that people can use as a reference to have an idea what is an added value of,
Not anymore that there is a cheat sheet, right, as you describe it. I think that really now what we have is immense amount of data. The appraisers have so much more data. You have so much more data. I have so much more. Consumers have it. And so because of that, there isn't I know this is kind of black box kind of material. I can't tell you that this square footage of this room of 300 square feet or whatever it is going to be the same cost and give you the same value in the building next door or in the building across the street that's facing the water or because there's always a factor that's going to be different.
Yeah.
And so it's not a, so here's an example I usually use when I speak to realtors and training and doing stuff is I'll say, if you were living in a vacuum, time stands still, and nothing happens except these two homes are built. They're 3-2, 1,800 square foot homes, the exact same material, even the same board somehow. Like everything's built exactly the same. All the materials the same, footprint's the same, everything's exactly the same. One house is placed here in the neighborhood, up the street. This house is here on the lake with a lake view. Everything else is identical, down to the atom, right? Those are exactly the same homes. The house here on the water is for sale for $350. This house is for sale for $300. What's the difference in value in these two homes?
The lake.
The lake, but how much is the view worth?
$50,000.
$50,000, right? The problem with that scenario is we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live when houses are built the exact same, exactly the same day, the same builders, same materials, everything.
Yep.
So there's so many factors. It would be great if we lived in a vacuum because then I wouldn't have a job because everybody'd be able to tell you exactly what is worth because
Yep.
it was all the same.
Right.
Because it's not the same, those houses are totally different. Even if it's the same builder, different crew, different time of the year, different whatever. They're older, newer. The view's better. Now you've got well, you know,
There's
now you
two
have
subjective factors too, like the lake versus the golf course is
Yes.
what it's too
right.
subjective.
Think
And
that-
yeah, I mean, it depends on back to my statue thing, right? If I don't play golf, I don't care about looking at a bunch of guys in weird pants. I'd rather look at the lake and see the the
Pants are
boats
kinda
going
cool
by.
sometimes.
Yeah, I have plenty of the pants. I probably yeah, but
Have
but
you
it's
seen John Daly?
I've got some of those pants. I don't think I wear them anymore. But that's where that question's kind of difficult to answer, is because there are so many variable factors. And that's why ultimately, and I'll take a second here if you don't mind, and talk about a little bit of the evolution of the appraisal industry, I think. And this is my own Jason McMullen eye on this thing, but it seems like we're seeing a trend towards some hybrid appraisals. We've got a lot of those now. We're seeing some of that. We saw during COVID where property inspection waivers were introduced a lot more. So you didn't have to have an appraisal based on a lot of data that was put in a black box of the agencies put out. So as we see that, I think what we might see over time is if a house hasn't sold for 20 years and these people moved to nursing homes or whatever, they've been there for a long time, and nobody really knows what's gone on in that house. It hasn't had any recorded information put on it. That house needs an appraisal. We need somebody to do it. But if you bought a house a year and a half ago and you're refinancing it today and you had a full appraisal a year and a half ago, do we really have to go back in there and spend all that money and do all that? A hybrid variation of appraisal with some data backup and all that kind of stuff, that I think is... So as we transition to some of those pieces, I think that's where we kind of move into some of that stuff because the data is so readily available. And that's what we're moving toward, is seeing some of that stuff. Now, I don't think anybody's ever going to say appraisers go away, we're gone out in the woods, whatever. Because I don't think a lender is going to feel comfortable giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to somebody not knowing what the collateral is and not knowing what that house looks like. It'll evolve into something new maybe, but I don't think it'll ever go away to where it's going to be just plug in a Zillow search and now I know how much the house is worth.
Right.
I think that they'll
Somebody
always
has to go
need,
out there.
They always,
They'll see.
is there termites in the house?
Yeah.
Is there, who knows? But
Exactly.
I think that will always be there. But I'm sorry, I kind of derailed the conversation to speak about that.
So you're saying AI won't take over your job?
No, I'm putting it out in the world to say that it won't. I'm just letting AI
We'll
know.
all use AI for our jobs.
There you
AI
go.
won't take our jobs.
There you
That's
go.
the
There you
that's
go.
the answer
There
everybody
you
needs to
go.
take. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We had a round of questions in the office, and the number one question in the office is it a bedroom if there is no closet in the room?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
So there's a window. You have a room. There's a bed. There's curtains up.
Sounds like an office to me, or
Sounds like you put a bed in the
Or like
room.
a-
Right. Okay.
playroom or something.
So no closet, no bedroom. That's what.
There you go.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
To make it official. So no closet, no bedroom, because they were so sure that
Yeah,
it was.
they're like half the office was like, yeah, you could just like build a wardrobe into it, and then it's like, but does it have like a built-in California closet into it? No, it's not a bedroom. Like-
Yeah, there's That's an argument that goes on a lot, and the people that stay on that side of it often lose that argument because it's not going to be recorded that way.
If it was a bedroom, they would have built it out as a bedroom.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A lot of those during COVID, you saw people taking formal dining rooms and turning them into quote unquote bedrooms, but it's the same thing.
So now with that, if you did like put like a French door on a formal dining room, and like let's say the wall like allowed you to build like a wall, like open closet, kind of like a California closet style thing, could you then get that reassessed as a bedroom or however?
It's a good
language
question.
you
I'm
want
not
to
sure
that?
I'm going to answer because I don't know that I have the answer
Yeah.
100%. But I would say that to me, I'm a little more private to having French doors in my bedroom.
I mean, they
For
don't.
me,
They don't.
I mean-
They don't have to have glass.
That's what I'm
panes in them,
visualizing.
You know what I mean? They could just be like.
Hello. A little privacy.
Yeah, no, I'm
Pretty sure French doors are just double
it
doors.
would be,
that, like,
yeah.
close
no,
together.
but I'm thinking external. But yeah,
We're
I think
older.
that-
We see through glasses for French doors.
That's right. But I think the answer to the question is I'll find out for you. But
Uh-huh.
I think that the re-permitting of the house
Yeah.
would have to take place for it to be
Okay.
officially.
So it would probably be a permanent thing, because I
Right.
would assume you could make it a bedroom, but it is not just that's a fifth bedroom.
Well, and let me add that to that because it's a good question, and I think that's something a lot of people think about when they're dealing with a seller. We talked about values and what to look for. I think you asked the question earlier. Is if you're adding things to a home, square footage is always great. Square footage and livable space is
Bathrooms.
always good. Bathrooms always good. They're not 100% money on return type things, but what you get is adding square footage is fine as long as you're paying attention. If you have a neighborhood, 1,400 square feet, and they're all
Oh, yeah.
2.2s,
Don't make that
and you
sound-
chop it up into a 4.2, well, now it's not a comp to the neighborhood. Now it's weird, and now it's this little tiny bedrooms that don't fit the model of the neighborhood, so then it makes it a challenge. If you have, Nana and Grandpa move in and you add another bedroom, that's okay, but just think about what you're making the adjustments long term that you might not be able to sell the house for the same ability because of adding square footage. Putting a bedroom, this is your bedroom, and you put a room in the back, that's good because it's adding square footage. But if you've added another bedroom that you've got to now chop up the house to make it not count in the same room count as other homes in the neighborhood, just makes it tricky.
That's true.
Yeah.
100%.
They're not giving credit for those garages that we see a lot often here. Those normally a 2.2, and then they do a conversion of the garage,
Permitted?
but not permitted. So yeah, exactly. They're
Yeah, if you want to
Why would
add,
people
if you want to
not
add
want a
square
garage?
foot,
hey, what's up? I mean, the sellers are the one.
I know, no, I get it.
I
I get
think we
it.
live in California or something. Why would you not want a garage?
No.
Yeah, it's tricky.
It rains here
Yeah.
often.
Often rains here, that's for sure.
Well, Jason from Nationwide Appraisal Network, man, it's been a pleasure for you. Thank you for stopping by, sharing some knowledge with us. We had some great questions. We had some great answers. Hopefully the community finds it real valuable. So thank you very much with NAN, Nationwide Appraisal Network, Jason McMullen, Tyler with Blue Gray Mortgage, Jeff Iglesias, John DeBellevue, Joe Flores with LPT Realty. Till next time.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
guys,
it,
good. All
Thanks
right.
so much for letting me come out. It was a pleasure. I think Tyler and I are going to be doing a in face-to-face here in the Tampa market. February, we're going to do one of these for realtors to come out and
Awesome.
and get to ask some questions as well.
Oh,
So I'm
cool.
sure we'll hear some
That's
more
awesome.
of that. But looking forward to that.
We'll make
But
sure to let
thanks for
all the
opportunity.
community know in Tampa. Definitely we look forward to that event
Absolutely.
with you guys. So
Appreciate it, guys.
Awesome.
all right, next
right.
week.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, guys.
Good
Take care.
stuff.